Hi, I'm Burke Burnett, and I'm Executive Secretary of the Pacific Science Association, which is based in Honolulu at the Bishop Museum. And PSA is having our 100th anniversary this year, which is obviously a terrible time to pick to have your 100th birthday, but there you go. In March this year, I was honored to join the Explorers Club as a fellow, so I want to thank again my sponsors, Jeff, Karen, and Mark. Now, I've had one of those careers that would have been absolutely impossible to plan, because after finishing graduate school, I didn't know quite what I wanted to do other than I didn't want a desk job. But somehow I got a gig in the anthropology department at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History. Now, I'd already traveled independently to some pretty out-of-the-way places, particularly in the Indonesian side of New Guinea, which is the western half of New Guinea, the world's highest and tallest tropical island, and it was then known as Irian Jaya and is now called Papua Province. So somehow an idea I had for a documentary film about the Korowai people who lived in tree houses in an extremely remote area of Papua, somehow that idea got picked up, and the Smithsonian ended up producing a documentary film called Lords of the Garden about the expedition we carried out there. Before our expedition, very little was known about the construction of the Korowai's very tall tree houses, some of which are over 30 meters tall, or even why they built them. So we determined that they built tree houses for a couple of very practical reasons. One, they're high above flood levels in one of the world's wettest areas. It rained constantly. Second, their height is part of a defense strategy against raids from rival clans. And third, they just like the view from up above the forest canopy. We also determined that cannibalism, as practiced by the Korowai, was part of the criminal justice system. Basically, for certain perceived egregious transgressions such as stealing, infidelity, or witchcraft, the punishment was death by cannibalism. Now, at the time of our expedition in 1993, there was a so-called pacification line only a couple of kilometers outside of our camp, and beyond which the Korowai living there had never had any contact with outsiders, so suffice to say we didn't press our luck. I was intensely interested in biodiversity conservation, and so from there I moved on to Conservation International, where among other projects I was one of the field organizers of a rapid biodiversity survey in the previously unexplored Wapoga River Basin. This was a really amazing place. It was a large, undocumented area of pristine forest with basically zero human disturbance. Our expedition scientists found many new species of frogs, insects, fishes, lizards, and plants, and we filled in a blank spot on the map in terms of biodiversity. In a later expedition I helped organize in my other organization, the Pacific Conservation Alliance, one of the botanists was kind enough to name a newly discovered plant species, Scaevola burnetti, in my honor, which is still one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me. From there, in 1997, as I mentioned, I founded my own NGO, Indo-Pacific Conservation Alliance, and for about 6 years, our main program was in the Ocelot region on the southwest coast of New Guinea, which, as some of you may remember, was the place where Michael Rockefeller tragically disappeared in 1961. The Ocelot people still maintain one of the great woodcarving traditions in the entire Pacific, and a whole part of a wing at the Metropolitan Museum in New York is dedicated to their art. Now, the biodiversity of the Ocelot region and the culture of the Ocelot people are really two sides of the same coin. If either their culture or their environment were degraded or disappeared, the other would soon follow. So in our conservation strategy with them, we were very keen to avoid a top-down approach and to instead ask them what their priorities were and how we can empower them to protect their forests and resources and their culture in a world that's changing very quickly and threatening both. We provided tools and training for Ocelot leaders to document and map their resources, which areas were used for sago gathering, fishing, hunting, etc., and which were culturally sacred areas. So the resulting documents that we helped produce were an important tool that they used to negotiate with outside extractive industries about which areas were important for subsistence, which were culturally sacred, and which might allow some sustainable outside harvesting. In the mid-2000s, I moved to Honolulu to run the Pacific Science Association, and we helped catalyze international multidisciplinary scientific collaboration on issues of regional and international importance, such as climate change, biodiversity, public health issues, the role of technology in new kinds of scientific research, scientific communication. And we organize large international scientific congresses every 2 years in different cities in the Asia-Pacific region, with the next one being next year in China. My current organization, PSA, is based at the Bishop Museum, which itself has an amazing legacy of exploration and documentation of the peoples and environments of the Pacific, going back to the great scientific expeditions led by Kenneth Emery and others back in the 1920s. Bishop Museum is one of the world's great repositories of Pacific biota and cultural collections, and now DNA and digital collections. So I feel honored to be a small part of the museum's legacy of exploration and scientific documentation of one of the world's great regions, the Pacific. And finally, last but not least, I've often wondered where I got my exploration wanderlust. So I'm going to date myself, but I'm just old enough to remember the last couple of Apollo missions, which completely enthralled me as a kid. As far as I'm concerned, they're the ultimate exploration yet conducted by the human species. Later in life, I've been fortunate enough to get to meet and know just a little most of the Apollo astronauts. And so I was especially saddened in March at the sudden passing of my friend Al Worden, who, as most of us remember, was an illustrious member of the Explorers Club. And so I really missed getting to tell Al that I'm now a fellow. I think he would have gotten a kick out of it. So that's all I've got. Thank you for your time and attention. Over and out, and back to the moderator.